You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, June 4th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. It also has to be a very, very special day here at the Russ Belville Show, because today is our official third anniversary. My God, where has the time gone? That's right, June 4th, 2012, I launched the independent Russ Belville Show on what was then National Cannabis Radio, or actually it was potnet.us. We started out on Potnet, and then we moved to National Cannabis Radio, and then evolved into 420 Radio. So I can't believe it. Thank you so much, everyone out there who supported me through all the tribulations, all the ups and downs, going from normal to becoming an independent. And those of you who followed along, I'm so glad that you did, because without you, I wouldn't be here. Your support as 420 Radio VIPs, your support with your companies that are sponsors of 420 Radio. I'm telling you, this is a totally independent operation. We don't get a paycheck. We don't get any sort of special dispensation from the major marijuana reform groups or anything like that. It's just the cannabis businesses and the cannabis community, and the cannabis community, I meant to say, that supports this show. And I'm so proud to be doing it for you. So thanks to all of you who've made such a difference in my life and allowed me to live the career that I've always dreamed of, being in marijuana media. Today's show is number 597. So that means we've done just about 200 shows per year, each show 2 hours long. And so if you add in all of the special event coverage, we've easily done more than 400 hours of marijuana media every year here at the Russ Belville Show. And I can only imagine that more is coming your way. The more support we get, the more we'll do. So thank you so much, everybody. Lots of great stuff coming up in the future. But coming up on today's show, it's Thursday, so we've got one of our regular Cops Say Legalized Drugs segments. Today, we've got a new speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition joining us. He's retired Detective Ken Williams. He's from Brockton, Massachusetts, and he's got a lot to say about the recent events in Ferguson, in Baltimore, and policing in general. So we'll get his take on that at 5:30. Also on the show, we'll have time for my radical rant. Today, we're going to ask, where does religious cannabis use leave us atheists? The Indiana Church of Cannabis is starting their protests, I guess, their services on July 1st under their Religious Freedom Restoration Act. We've got Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon out there in Rhode Island protesting for their religious use. But what about those of us who don't follow any sort of religion? What does this mean for us? We'll talk about that in the Radical Rant. Also on the show today, in Drug War Data Mining, we're going to take a look at the legal cannabis industry driving an economic boom in Colorado. Houses are becoming more valuable. Jobs are aplenty. We'll talk all about that. We've also got in Behind the Headlines a look at how the legalization of pot in America is changing the Mexican drug war. So all that detail coming from south of the border, reported by Bloomberg News. But we'll start things off with the 420 Radio News. And in the headlines today, we'll recap the big day in Washington, D.C. yesterday. We'll take a look at Colorado having a tax holiday for marijuana, Minnesota's medical marijuana program off to a slow start, Alaska's Marijuana Control Board getting swamped with applicants, and cannabis use in the UK is down by half in a decade. Why? Well, we'll find out when we come back. You're listening to The Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the activist radio station.
420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating elegant and sophisticated cannabis solutions through its line of dispensers and vaporizers that come preloaded with the world's finest cannabis concentrate. Sacred Serum's concentrate is made on pharmaceutical-grade supercritical CO2 extraction machines that use absolutely no butane or other toxic chemicals. The Vesica, the company's innovative new way to dab and frost, is now available in dispensaries across California. Sacred Serum, elegance and sophistication concentrated.
Hey, I'm Herb Thrasher, host of the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, live every Friday night at 8 Pacific. Tune in for 2 hours of metal marijuana mayhem featuring exclusive interviews with the latest bands, highlights of live shows, and the latest in marijuana news. It's the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, Friday nights at 8 p.m. at 420 Radio, or catch the replay on Saturday nights.
Come join the fun at the CannaCon Expo, the nation's largest cannabis marketplace for products, services, and ideas. CannaCon is where the cannabis industry does business. CannaCon is coming to the Colorado Convention Center in downtown Denver, kicking off Thursday, June 11th through Saturday, June 13th. Tickets are on sale now at cannacon.org. That's CannaCon, CANNACON.org. If you're looking for the best deals on growing gear and the most innovative products in the market, don't miss CannaCon. CannaCon will provide you with the opportunity to meet and do business directly and most affordably with the grow gurus and suppliers. CannaCon seminars are designed to be informal, open, and an educational conference where growers, processors, retailers, suppliers, and consultants can frankly discuss issues that impact this thriving industry. Don't miss CannaCon, coming to the Colorado Convention Center June 11th through Saturday the 13th. Tickets are on sale now at cannacon.org.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Thursday, June 4th, 2015. In the strongest sign yet that deciders in Washington may soon be ready to undo federal marijuana prohibition, both Democrats and Republicans voted to approve 3 pro-cannabis budget amendments and came very close to approving a 4th in support of recreational marijuana. Bipartisan votes approved amendments forbidding Justice Department officials from interfering in state legal medical cannabis operations, industrial hemp programs, and laws that allow citizens to access products high in CBD or cannabidiol. The biggest day for cannabis in Congress to date led one pro-marijuana lawmaker, Congressman Earl Blumenauer of Oregon, to predict that prohibition will be done within 5 years. The pro-marijuana amendments are all meant to limit the Drug Enforcement Administration's reach by cutting its budget. All told, about $23 million was cut from the DEA's budget and shifted to other Justice Department endeavors like police body cameras and rape kit testing. Colorado will repeal all taxes on marijuana September 16th, thanks to a quirk in the state's constitution. The impetus is the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, or TABOR, which, when triggered by tax overcollection, requires the tax rate to be cut to zero. State lawmakers agreed to eliminate the sales tax for 1 day to meet the constitutional obligations and then restore it. The tax holiday is expected to cost the state about $100,000 in revenue. The bigger price tag, $3.6 million, is what the state anticipates losing in revenue for a 1-day elimination of the 15% excise tax on marijuana sales from cultivators to retailers. A permanent sales tax break on recreational marijuana takes effect July 2017, lowering the rate from 10% to 8%. Also in the works is a ballot question this fall. The state will ask voters permission to keep the estimated $58 million in pot taxes collected this fiscal year. The Minnesota Department of Health says only 5 patients have been certified for the state's new medical marijuana program so far. Only 30 doctors have registered, and a new poll shows an overwhelming majority are not interested in participating. A survey by the Minnesota Medical Association found only 9% of doctors say they will take part in the program. 68% of them say they won't participate, and 17% are undecided. The figure is significant because patients cannot sign up by themselves. A doctor must enroll them. Some medical practices are wary of attracting too many patients simply in search of cannabis certification. Some have more questions about the drug's efficacy or possible side effects. Registration for the program, which begins July 1st, just started on Monday. More than 100 Alaskans are vying for a spot on the Marijuana Control Board, Alaska's new regulatory body that will craft the state's marijuana regulations, according to documents released by the state. Among the list of applicants are marijuana initiative supporters, business owners, a few people who spoke out against the initiative, and the attorney who represented the famous Bong Hits for Jesus case. The 132 applicants are hoping to fill one of 5 seats on the board. One member will come from the public safety sector, another from the public health sector, one from the marijuana industry, one person either from the general public or the marijuana industry, and one person will be chosen who lives in a rural area. Alaska Governor Bill Walker will appoint the board, which will then need to be approved by the legislature. Katie Marquette, Walker's deputy press secretary, wrote that the response was greater for the Marijuana Control Board than for other seats on state boards. Cannabis use in the UK has almost halved over the past decade, even as marijuana use among 15 to 34-year-olds has grown throughout most of Europe, according to the annual report by the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drug Addiction. This was released on Thursday. As Brits are increasingly turning down pot, nations across Europe and states in the United States have begun decriminalizing marijuana-related offenses and use of the drug. The decreased use of pot in the UK came as something as a surprise to researchers. In 2003, roughly 19% of British 15 to 34-year-olds used cannabis, but only about 11% consumed marijuana in 2013, according to the report. The drop in marijuana use could also be attributed to a general decline of smoking in the nation, especially since pot and tobacco are frequently combined in Britain. At the same time, the price of pot in the United Kingdom has nearly doubled over the past 10 years. This has been your 420 Radio News for Thursday, June 4th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville. .420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts. Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the 4th Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers.
NORML stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs.
The Fingerboard Extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard Extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard Extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com. Welcome back, everybody. Time for us to go behind the headlines, where Bloomberg Business reports on America's quality pot is changing the drug war. And it focuses mostly on the country of Mexico, where for decades the flow of marijuana went from south to north. The Mexican marijuana, the Acapulco Gold and such, would make its way across the U.S.-Mexico border and into the hands of the cannabis consumers here in America. Now that flow is somewhat slowed down and to some extent reversed. American marijuana is so much better now than Mexican marijuana that it's becoming a demand product In Mexico, they report on a street lieutenant in Ciudad Juarez who deals for Barrio Azteca, and he talks about the medical marijuana facilities that he had seen in Arizona, where they have the big warehouses with automated watering, automated oxygen, automated CO2, and so forth. And he says the connoisseurs, marijuana connoisseurs in Juarez, are noticing and beginning to demand purple haze or kush from American dispensaries. The prices are 4 times higher for American marijuana, about 200 pesos per gram for American marijuana compared to 50 pesos per gram for the Mexican variety. But he says, quote, "There's much more novelty, more variety," end quote. And this is an interesting kind of unintended consequence from the Bill Clinton era NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that allowed trucking to flow goods between the two countries much more easily and in greater volumes, now is leading to marijuana being trucked from America and into Mexico, the reverse of what they've always had to deal with. According to their statistics, only 1/6 of cannabis consumed in the U.S. was grown in the U.S. That was in the past. 1 out of 6 pounds was produced in the U.S. Now they say it's up to 1/3. So 1 out of every 3 pounds being consumed in the U.S. is grown within the U.S. They say the pot from Colorado and California has started to displace the stuff that's been trucked in by tunnel, truck, and human mule. The marijuana seizures by U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the California border totaled 132,000 pounds in fiscal 2014. That's half as much as they had seized just 5 years earlier. And entrepreneurs now in Mexico are beginning to recognize the burgeoning American market and trying to transplant some of those conditions back down to Mexico. There is an entrepreneur named Sean Lucas. He founded Denver's Dutch Hort grow equipment supplier, and he believes that Colorado marijuana will eventually be a global brand, and says that in Mexico City, young men that are hawking mota in the outdoor markets name check the American brand names. According to a former media analyst at First Union Securities, he says by 2020, American sales might reach $35 billion of marijuana per year. For comparison's sake, Americans spent $38 billion on pizza restaurants last year. That's right. The cannabis market could be almost as big as the pizza market by 2020, and somewhat synergistic, I could imagine. And at the production level, the Mexican farmers are giving up on farming marijuana. There are programs in Mexico to help farmers kick growing the drugs, growing marijuana, growing opium, and instead switch to growing tomatoes or, beans or whatever else they might want to grow, potatoes, I suppose. And that particular program is now experiencing a great increase in use among the Mexican people. More of them are turning to it. One particular Mexican grower talked about how he used to get $100 a kilo for the marijuana he would grow. He's now only getting $25 a kilo, and saying that it's just no longer worth it to be growing marijuana. So for planting crops like tomatoes or green beans, the subsidy program, that subsidy program's increased 30% just over the past 2 years. And the Mexican authorities are attributing that to American marijuana legalization. And as the Mexican marijuana becomes less and less in demand, some of these Mexican farmers and some of the cartels that depend on them are switching their production more to poppies, more to heroin. And they also note that there's been an increase, a tripling of U.S. overdose deaths from heroin since 2010. Half of the heroin in the United States now comes from Mexico. That's up from 14% back in 2009. So in the period of 6 years, we've over tripled the amount of heroin that's coming in from Mexico. Now, this will be used by our opponents to show that the Mexican drug cartels aren't going away and the promise that marijuana would make them go away is not to be fulfilled. Don't let them get away with that misdirection. Remind them that in America, there are some 28 million people that use marijuana on a regular basis compared to less than 300,000 people who use heroin on a regular basis. And if anybody wants to know whom to blame with respect to the rise of overdose deaths in America due to heroin, blame the pharmaceutical companies who have been so successful on pushing OxyContin and Vicodin on our people, getting them addicted to those expensive pills, and then people find out that the heroin that can replace those pills is far, far cheaper.
I spent the last 2 years of high school in a daze.
Well, really, who didn't, Mr. President? I remember my last 2 years of high school were filled with drama, speech and debate, band, a lot of drinking too. But no weed. I didn't smoke weed in high school. Didn't smoke weed until I was 22. I don't know. I don't want to say I should have smoked weed in high school, but if I could have switched alcohol for weed, it'd probably been better for me. We'll be back right after this.
420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz.
Hey, I'm Herb Thrasher, host of the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, live every Friday night at 8 Pacific. Tune in for 2 hours of metal marijuana mayhem featuring exclusive interviews with the latest bands, highlights of live shows, and the latest in marijuana news. It's the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, Friday nights at 8 p.m. at 420 Radio, or catch the replay on Saturday nights.
Yeah, come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com. Come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com. Whether it's a vape, pen, a pipe, or a bong, you can find it right now on weedshop.com. We got dab rings, nails, and ship it fast, whipping any of a competitor's glass. Come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com. Come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com.
Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everybody. And the Drug War Data Mines today will continue with a theme that we began in Behind the Headlines, and that is the effect of legal marijuana on economics. Now, we looked at Mexico and how our legal marijuana is affecting them. Let's take a look back home at how legal marijuana is affecting folks in Colorado. CNN Money has a story up today, the real estate special report entitled The Pot Effect on Denver's Housing Market. And this is stuff I've heard anecdotally from people in Denver, especially people that are just moving there and trying to find housing. And that is, it's very, very scarce and the rents are getting higher and higher. According to CNN Housing, who quotes the S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index, Denver, this is for the month of March, the latest data available, Denver experienced the second largest jump in annual home prices at 10%. A 10% jump in annual home prices, just behind San Francisco. Now, of course, San Francisco, very, very small, limited area, always attracting people. It's understandable that their real estate prices are going to be pretty high. But Denver, if you've ever been out to Denver, It's this huge expanse of a metro area that stretches eastward across those plains and just kind of nestles up against that western front range. So the idea that in a sprawling city like Denver that they'd be hurting for housing is pretty amazing. Now, according to James Payne, the managing partner at West Realty Advisors, he says, quote, "There's been a huge bump in real estate prices due to the legalization of marijuana. It's massively pushed up raw land and industry prices." And they say this has just been going up and up and up since 2012 when the state has legalized marijuana. Now, according to the reports, the housing market there is really hurting. They usually have about 24,000 listings in their normal market. This is according, who is the fellow that's saying this? I'm going to find his name again. Kelly Moye, who is a Remax real estate agent who's worked in the Denver area for 24 years. He says that there's typically she says, Kelly's a female. She says that Denver typically has 24,000 listings for empty, vacant housing. Right now, there's only about 4,000. So 1/6 the number of listings possible. Toby Waters, a real estate agent for Vision Denver Homes, says, quote, "There are a lot of first-time buyers. The rental market is insane. You can save money by buying a house." And this is really difficult for some of the people that are moving into the state, attracted by the jobs. Kelly Moye also says, quote, "The pot industry is creating jobs we didn't have before. It's brand new. It adds a whole new factor to the area. You have real estate needs, housing needs, job needs," end quote. And this is beyond just the need for dispensaries and marijuana grows and processors and so forth. There's also existing businesses that are booming thanks to the legalization market, such as security and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning companies who service these new businesses. According to J.P. Spears, an agent at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, quote, "Electricians have grown from mom and pops to big-time electric companies," end quote. Also, Denver has become a hotspot for the tech industry as well. So there's another source of job rush right now. And while the home prices have gone up, apparently the cost of living itself hasn't gone up very much. Moye says, quote, "It's fairly affordable, at least for now. The quality of life is great and employers are bringing their employees here." They're also seeing an increase in lease to purchase or rent to own home rentals for tenants who are starting to grow their operations there. The question now is, how long can this housing boom last? Now, this is having a benefit for the existing homeowners in the state of Colorado and in the county of Denver there, in that their home values are going up and up as well. So even people who voted against Amendment 64, people who don't like marijuana, people who never shop at a pot shop, are experiencing an economic value from the legalization of marijuana. The value of their homes is increasing. And if they don't like the marijuana so much, why, they can sell their home and move to Idaho if they like and make a ton of money doing it. So marijuana legalization having a huge impact in the state of Colorado, in the city of Denver with respect to the housing market. And according to Moye, the market has room to run for 5 to 7 years, barring any major economic disasters. Now, of course, the other thing that could have an impact on whether or not Colorado continues to see this major boom is the impact that legalization may have on other states. Now, a state like Oregon and Alaska, they're not likely to take much of the luster away from Colorado, although I believe that the tourism aspects of Oregon may lead Oregon to eventually become more of a tourist destination for marijuana vacationers than Colorado might be. But come 2016 and the state of California, if California is to get marijuana legalization on the ballot and pass it, I think that's when you'll start to see the decline in the other marijuana states as far as their share of the green rush happens. Remember, the states that legalize in the top 10, those ones are the ones that are going to get some kind of economic benefit. But if your state is number 48, 49, or 50, there's not going to be much left on the table for you.
420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out lushledlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: cops say legalize drugs.
Welcome back, everyone. Time for our Cops Say Legalize Drugs segment. And joining us today from Brockton, Massachusetts, we have Ken Williams. He's a retired detective with the Brockton, Massachusetts Police Department. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today, Russ.
Very glad to have you here today. And as I go through your biography on leap.cc, the thing that stands out to me is your actions as a whistleblower against the city of Brockton and its police department for their failure to comply with non-discrimination. And given what we've seen in the news lately with police departments and the whole issue of black and white and everything that's happening with Ferguson and Baltimore, I thought that might be a good place for us to start. Can you give us some background on that and what you had found in your time as a police officer?
Certainly. One of the things that people need to consider is that since 1995, the federal government has expended $15 billion in the COPS program through the Department of Justice. And it created basically a jobs bill. It hired out hundreds of thousands of people to join the ranks of law enforcement. And whenever a entity, whether it's a school, whether it's a police force or a housing area that receives federal funds, once that entity receives federal funds, it has to comport with federal anti-discrimination law. So when we look at people in the streets, they're protesting, they have their hands up, and they're basically saying they're at a loss at how they can hold police accountable, how to reform the system, and how to have their voices heard. Title VI, under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, is a measure that is very capable of allowing the people to control the police force, because ultimately it's the taxpayers that fund the police. The police don't fund the taxpayers.
Absolutely. And when we look at these problems with policing and the effect that over-policing is having on African-American communities, of course, the war on drugs sits front and center as to one of the reasons behind this. Let's talk on this in two ways. Number one, how much does the war on drugs contribute and how much ending that would help? But number two, how much of this is systemic within policing and our culture in general that even changing the war on drugs won't be enough? Where do you come down in that spectrum?
The war on drugs is definitely if we can parse it out, if we think about it as an upstream problem and a downstream problem. Okay. When we look at the violence and the death downstream as an effect of the policy, the cause is upstream from the 1970 policy. We can then look at the fact that if we eliminate the policy, we'll then control and maybe reduce a lot of that death and mayhem that we see at the bottom level downstream. So when I look at the war on drugs, I mean, I ask people all the time, did we have a gang problem before the 1970s? And a lot of folks will say, maybe back in the 1920s when we had alcohol prohibition.
Yeah.
And that's a very accurate response, because ultimately that was the last time that we had any real strife, death, and violence that was attributed to a policy by the government basically trying to make the nation a dry nation. So when we look at more than 40 years after the war on drugs was announced in the 1970s, and we're looking at the effects downstream, we created as a policy, as a nation in that policy, all of that violence. And when I say that, it's because we now have the Mexican drug cartel that's earning $65 billion annually each year smuggling drugs across the border. We've also created a corruption issue because those drugs are mostly flown in across the border, and that means that it requires Americans and folks across that border to, basically work together to make that happen. The next issue is because we've spent $1.5 trillion since 1970 on this war. We have to think about what have we solved when we still have as a nation 1 to 1.5% hardcore users, and we know the numbers as far as casual users are far greater than that. So we as a nation created the violence that's downstream. Ending the war on drugs cuts back on the violence, because then a person on the street corner doesn't have to carry a firearm to go and protect a stash that they're trying to go and sell on the street corner. They're out of business the next day.
And that speaks to this escalation, this kind of arms race we've seen between the criminals and the police. If we think of gangs back to West Side Story, it was knives. Even the movie The Warriors from 1979, it was baseball bats and chains. And now we're looking at gangs with Uzis and Glocks, and the police up armoring with, military style vehicles. Can we reverse this trend? Do you think that the cops will give up and the criminals will give up these weapons even if we end the war on drugs?
Ending the war on drugs means that we have to have communication. Community policing has to be paramount in order to go and have the de-escalation of violence all the way around. At the same time, we have to be honest with ourselves and realize that in the 1970s, when this policy was created, it ultimately was just a jobs bill. It created more judges, more prosecutors, more police officers. We went shoveling, brick and for unions to go and build more prison complexes. In fact, since the 1970s, when we look at the number of arrests with marijuana possession, nonviolent offense, back in 1960s, we had maybe two arrests per hour in the nation. After the announcement of the war on drugs, that ballooned all the way to more than 86 per hour. So we went from 17,000 per year mere possession marijuana arrests to more than 850,000 per year. So we can't sustain that. As a nation, we can't sustain it. But at the same time, when we think about the problem racially, we have minorities that are being targeted more than whites for mere possession. And statistically, we already know, based on data, that there are more whites that actually are, based on the percentage, that actually have used these drugs and stuff like that, but minorities are targeted. So, in fact, we're looking at 1 in 3 black men. I'm age 50. I'm an African-American male. 1 in 3 black men my age have been incarcerated.
Yeah.
That's a staggering statistic.
Yeah, completely shocking. We're speaking with Ken Williams. He's a retired detective with the Brockton, Mass. Police Department and a speaker with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. You can get a great speaker like Ken in your area. They've got hundreds of them all across the United States and around the world. Check out leap.cc for more information. And, Ken, with respect to your experience working in the Brockton, Mass. Police Department, I'm sure you had to deal with a lot of drug offenders. Did you find it to be a revolving door? You're just dealing with the same people over and over again and nothing was changing?
Correct. I mean, as a law enforcement officer, I believe people that go into law enforcement, some folks, unfortunately, like every business out there, they go in for the wrong reasons. But a majority of people go into law enforcement, I believe, to actually help protect, serve, citizens. As a police officer, it's frustrating to go to work every day. I was a homicide detective for 13 years. to go to work every single day. And if I could paraphrase it this way, if you showed up to work every day and downstream babies were in the river and you just bailed babies out of a river every day, at some point in time you have to start thinking, why don't we go upstream and try to figure out putting these babies in the river to solve this problem, right?
Right.
So the war on drugs is upstream. As a policy, the policy has created the Mexican cartel. It's created the smuggling operation, the money operation that's earning the $65 billion. And downstream, when we look at the violence that's being caused by that policy, if we eliminated the upstream prohibition issue, we eliminate the downstream violence issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well spoken. Now, looking at the high-profile cases we've seen recently, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, and so forth, we see this overuse of violence and this portrayal of black suspects as being hyper-violent, super strong killers. That this dates back to Harry J. Anslinger and the original prohibition of marijuana, and we even find it being perpetrated by black officers against black people. What are we going to have to do to change that, and how can we get the good cops to start, ratting out the bad cops?
Russ, that's an excellent question. And one of the things that I started doing was I actually testified for House Bill 1187 in Maryland back in March of this year. House Bill 1187 is a unique kind of bill. It would have afforded police officers who joined the ranks of police department in Maryland to be trained about their protections, if they start to go and speak on matters of public concern, corruption, abuse, waste, fraud, those type of measures. And it's different than the actual laws that are on the books today. It would have given not only the officers some training about their rights in their First Amendment speech, but it would have also afforded the agency notice not to go and violate those rights before there's any kind of adverse action taking place. The police unions keep on shooting down these bills, and basically they don't want a good cop testifying against a rogue bad cop, and we need to change that. We had to have those good cops stand up, speak out on matters of public concern regarding these issues that are happening inside these police agencies, because that's what the people hired them to do, not just arrest crimes out in the streets, but arrest racism, hatred, hate crimes, discrimination, end all that stuff, because that's an important thing that has to take place in society so we can move forward together as a society and quell some of these long-standing problems.
Would this bill protect any whistleblowers in the department from retribution? And did you face any retribution when you blew the whistle?
I most certainly did face retribution. I got thrown off the force, but that doesn't mean that I'm helpless. In fact, I filed what's called the False Claim Act case, the first in the nation, which is a novel approach using Title VI to actually force my police department, hopefully if we survive in court these different motions that the police agency and city are trying to file at this moment to challenge it. It would force them to have to pay back triple damages to the tax-paying citizens for basically, essentially committing fraud.
Wow!
They took the money. They're accountable for the money, and they're accountable to make sure that they aren't violating the anti-discrimination federal law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I wish you the best of luck on that, and as well with this this bill that's being pushed forth. If people would like to get in contact with you or to find out more about these campaigns in Massachusetts, do you have any contact info for them?
Certainly. You can reach me by cell phone 774-451-1290, and by email. My email address is KWILL46125 at Verizon.net. KWill46125 at Verizon.net.
All right. Ken Williams with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I want to thank you for your police service and your military service. I noticed that in your background as well. And good luck on all of these actions to try to arrest the war on drugs. We appreciate your work.
Thank you, Russ.
All right. Stay tuned, folks. We'll come back. We'll have time for a radical rant. In the age of religious cannabis use, where does that leave the non-believers? We'll talk about that when we come back from break. Stick around. You're listening to The Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org.
Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day. You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
Continue the conversation with Radical Russ online. Visit radicalruss.com and email radicalruss@gmail.com.
Quick note from the news files out there. Como News in Seattle reporting a man was shot in the leg after refusing to share marijuana. 1:50 in the morning, the 35-year-old victim was smoking pot on a corner. Another man approached him, asked him to share. When he said no, the man got angry, pulled out a gun, and shot the victim in the leg. Hey, I know don't bogart that joint is a rule and all, but you don't have to be so serious about it, people. We're back with the Radical Rant right after this. Science!
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, these days, we've told you a lot of stories about people who are fighting for their religious right to use cannabis. Of course, Bill Levin is out there in the state of Indiana who responded to his state passing a new Religious Freedom Restoration Act. This is one of those bills designed to protect the true believers in whatever religion it may be from government interference with their religion, with their worship, however they want to choose to believe. And it's one of those situations where it's kind of these unintended consequences because these laws are, you know, they're supposedly protecting everyone's right to religion, but what they're really about is protecting the cake maker who doesn't want to make a gay wedding cake. Right? Or it's protecting the business that wants to still institute some form of discrimination against gay people. And then they want to cloak it in hiding it in religion that, oh, well, you know, the Bible says that the gays are bad. So, and I never understood why baking a cake for a wedding, for a gay wedding, is somehow going to put you in the doghouse with Jesus Christ when allegedly that fellow was hanging out with prostitutes and thieves and beggars and lepers. I don't understand how a religion based on that guy would have a problem with you baking a cake for some gay people. That just doesn't make internal sense. Doesn't even fit its own internal logic. Nevertheless, these laws, these Religious Freedom Restoration Act, especially in Indiana, was designed for that particular thing. You know, a lot of these people in these red states are upset that the arc of the universe is bending toward justice and that we're beginning to recognize the rights of people to shack up with one another regardless of what gender of person they choose to be with, right? That's just happening and they're freaked out about it. And so they're doing everything they can. They're wailing and flailing and passing these laws, thinking that that's going to be the way they're going to protect their bigotry. And the unintended consequence, of course, is that these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts open up the door for a guy like Bill Levin to form a church of cannabis. And the way this Indiana law is written, it's written very, very loosely so that it encompasses just about every religious practice you could think of. It defers to the adherent, it defers to the religious to a far greater degree than it defers to the government. In other words, the government's got to come up with a really good reason to ban whatever it is you're going to do and for religious reasons. And Levin believes that this law is going to protect him, that he's going to have, as of July 1st, when this law goes into effect in Indiana, that he's going to have a temple, he's going to have people show up, and they're going to smoke pot. And he thinks they're going to get away with it. And maybe they will. It'll be interesting to see how conservatives running these counties and cities in the state of Indiana react to something like this. They can't react too much against it without subverting their own cause, their own purpose of putting together these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts. So it's as a civil disobedience thing, as a constitutional kind of fight for your rights thing. I applaud this. If I had more than two hands, I'd clap them too. I'm all for this. I think this is great. And we've also spoken and had on our show with Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon. We spoke to them about their actions going on in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, there is a monument, a national monument to Roger Williams. And it's a monument to our fight for religious freedom in this country. And they plan to hold a ceremony there at the Roger Williams site to use cannabis in a religious manner. And they believe that they have the protection of the Constitution to do so. And they also have filed for their permits to perform the action. And they believe the permits are tacitly allowing them to use cannabis. Now, we'll see how that runs down too. And again, I have to say, from the point of view of someone who's all about inciting some political revolution here, these are awesome. It's great that these people are standing up for this. The question I have, though, is what does this all mean to those of us who don't subscribe to religion? It's kind of a thorny issue here because I absolutely support people's freedom of religion and to believe what they want to believe. But if this Indiana thing is going down and you have to be a member of this church to be able to get this permission to use cannabis, is that not establishing a special right for religion? Is that not government endorsing a religion? Remember, when it comes to our First Amendment, the government's supposed to be neutral. It's not supposed to restrict religion, but it's also not supposed to endorse an establishment of religion. And if Indiana is going to allow people who believe a certain creed to use cannabis, how can it deny that right to the rest of us? Now, a comparison's sake, for comparison's sake, we could look at the Catholics, right? The Catholic religion has a communion service in which one receives the transmuted body of Christ in the form of a little cracker and the transmuted blood of Christ in the form of a little thimble full of wine. And in that religion, it's literally believed that those are the body and blood of Christ. That's their religion. That's their sacrament. But the difference is, I can go buy crackers and wine, and I'm not Catholic. You feel me? You see where I'm coming from here? We allow this communion to happen. It's part of their religion. It's within their religious right to do so. But it's not something that's restricted to non-believers. I can go buy Ritz crackers and a bottle of Mad Dog 2020 if I want and and transport myself back to high school, I guess. But you know what I'm saying? In the case of the Indiana Church of Cannabis or Ann Gordon and Alan Armstrong out there in Rhode Island, they're seeking the ability to use a sacrament that non-believers are not only not allowed to use, but are punished for using. How does that not turn into a situation where government is punishing non-belief? Either way you look at it, to me, it looks like government endorsing a form of religion, a form of religious thought, to allow a sacrament to be used only by those members, but not by the rest of us. Now, I will make a similar point with respect to the federal laws that have already been decided. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act that was passed by our federal Congress and then backed up by the Supreme Court in the UDV case, the Brazilian native church that's allowed to use ayahuasca tea, and a follow-up case for Native Americans that are allowed to use peyote. I would argue allowing them to use ayahuasca and peyote and not allowing non-believers to use it, and in fact punishing non-believers for using it, is once again an unconstitutional endorsement of one form of religion over another. Let's take a counterexample. Let's pretend that there's a Church of the Aztec, Church of Quetzalcoatl, right? Quetzalcoatl, the great Aztec serpent god, right? And let's say, as part of this religion, one of the tenets of the religion is the sacrifice of a virgin. We're not going to allow them to do that in America. No matter what Religious Freedom Restoration Act is, the compelling interest of the federal government to prevent us from murdering people is a far greater interest than restricting someone's freedom of religion. This is the balancing test that the courts use, right? Is it more compelling for the government to ban this or to ban that versus not allowing people the free exercise of religion? Well, obviously murder is more important than freedom of religion in this case. We can't allow the Church of Quetzalcoatl to kill virgins. And that would be consistent because we don't allow anybody to kill virgins, right? Doesn't matter you believe or not, killing virgins is right out. So we have the Church of Quetzalcoatl example, the mind experiment here, where both believers and non-believers are forbidden from doing something. We have the Catholic Church example over here, where both believers and non-believers are allowed to do something. But then we have the ayahuasca, the peyote, the marijuana churches, where only if you pledge that you truly believe this particular creed are you allowed to do something. And that to me just smacks of being un-American. It smacks to me of government endorsement of a certain religion. And from my point of view, as an atheist, and I've never been shy about pointing that fact out, from my point of view, it actually sullies the churches. Imagine that alcohol prohibition were back in vogue, and this time done like marijuana prohibition, right? Because you remember like the old alcohol prohibition, Al Capone days, you could actually possess alcohol. You could get medical alcohol, and you could drink alcohol. So you just couldn't buy it, sell it, or transport it, right? But now I'm talking, let's say there's real, honest to goodness, full scale marijuana-like prohibition on alcohol. Do you think more people might join the Catholic Church? Do you think people might fake going through confession and all those things just to get their hands on some communion wine? So for the people that want to pledge some sort of cannabis church, do you not think that some of us non-religious, agnostic, or atheistic tokers are going to fake it to get into your Indiana church so that we don't get prosecuted? And if we are faking it, aren't we just diluting the truth of your message? Aren't we cheapening it, demeaning it in some way? To me, I don't understand the fighting for a religious right to use cannabis without fighting for everyone's right to use cannabis. If you're a person in a religion who believes this is the sacred herb, the healing of the nations, then you should be trying to get it out to the nations. You should be fighting for full marijuana legalization, not just a specific exemption for you and your friends and your pals who all believe a certain story. Now, I've been told, in fact, Alan Gordon told me in our interview that the right he's fighting for religiously would guarantee the right of people who are non-religious to be able to use it. And in that case, then if there's a difference that makes no difference, what's the difference? Right? If you're going to fight for a religion that allows everyone to get into it to be able to use pot, why not just fight for everyone to use pot and avoid the middleman? We'll talk more about this in hour 2. Toker Talk Radio will also take your calls toll free at 84-420-RADIO. That's 844-207-2346. We're also listening in the chat room. John Thomas, Cultivator, Brian Kerr, they're all up there chatting up a storm. But I gotta go. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it.